Well, good afternoon. My name is Ala McCoy. I am Director of Venture Development at the University of Maryland UM Ventures. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who joined us today for the next installment in Startup Fundamentals Workshop Series, both our live webinar audience and those watching a recorded version on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. This workshop series is offered by UM Ventures with collaboration from MTech at the Clark School of Engineering and the Neuman Center for Entrepreneurship at the Smith School of Business. We appreciate your support. To everyone attending the live session, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We are recording this session, so it will be posted on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. So if you wish, you can submit your questions anonymously. There's something that you can check. So today, I invited a successful entrepreneur, angel investor, very successful public servant, and just an all-around amazing woman with a fascinating story, Laura Neuman, to talk to us about what, in her view, are the top mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And to make today's session even more interesting, Laura invited Edwin to join our session as an interviewee. And she met Edwin during one of her EIR sessions. So Edwin connected with Laura, seeking advice for entrepreneurs. And Edwin, would you like to introduce yourself real quick to everyone?
Sure. My name's Edwin. I am currently a business planning specialist at Three Brothers. So I just graduated as well. So,
Congratulations.
happy
So
to
you
be
just
here.
graduated. Yeah, you just graduated University of Maryland.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you have tough questions for Laura?
Yeah. I do.
She can handle tough. I don't know if I know a tougher woman than Laura.
You're very kind. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much to you both. And thank you to everyone in our audience today. Please feel free to send your questions either by chat or Q&A. And I and Edwin both will monitor those and answer them as well, or we'll pose them to Laura. I will go ahead and mute my mic and turn off my camera. And Laura and Edwin, the floor is yours. Thank you again to both of you. And again, please submit lots of questions.
Thank you, Ella. It's really nice to be here today. This is going to be so much fun. Now, I really love the opportunity to speak with folks at University of Maryland, actually everywhere, about entrepreneurship, because this is something I care deeply about. I've done these seminars a couple times, and I've shared some of my experience and the challenges I've seen as an entrepreneur, but I thought it'd be really fun today to have Edwin ask me the questions because, he's sitting in the seat where many of you are. He's a recent graduate. He went to University of Maryland. He is, building his future. And we had a chance to meet because he signed up for some time with me, and I was immediately impressed with his determination and creativity. And so I said, let's make this fun and make it sort of a Q&A so that we can talk about it and really understand the kinds of questions that he wants to have answered. And hopefully I can provide some context. But I'm going to first start with a super quick bio, a little bit of background about me. And Edwin, feel free to jump in and ask me more questions if you think it would be helpful to frame the conversation. But I just wanted to share how I became an entrepreneur. I didn't really plan to be an entrepreneur. In fact, what I really wanted was to go to college. That was my primary goal. I have a background that is a little bit unusual. I did not have a traditional path into business. I was really just looking for opportunities. So, I grew up in inner city Baltimore, and my parents were not high school. They hadn't graduated high school. They were both high school dropouts. And they didn't really understand college, and they didn't understand business. But I knew at a very early age that I wanted to live a different life, that I wanted opportunity. And so, I sort of made it my mission to put college in my future. Unfortunately, I ended up dropping out of high school too. And in fact, at one point I was living out of my car. So I lived out of my car for about 6 months as I saved enough money to move into an apartment. So it was from that foundation that I had to figure out how to build a future. And candidly, I didn't really know how to do it. So I applied for my first job in business, and it turned out that it was answering 800 number calls for a company called T. Rowe Price. I didn't even know what T. Rowe Price was when I was applying for the job. I just knew that I didn't want to be a waitress. I wanted to have some sort of career. I had no idea what I was walking into. And in fact, initially they refused to interview me. They said, do you have a college degree? And I couldn't say yes to that. But I got them to agree to meet with me. And one of the things you'll learn in being an entrepreneur is that you've got to be pretty convincing, and you have to believe in yourself in order to convince other people to invest in you. And so I convinced them to meet with me, and they ended up hiring me. So that was my first job in business, and I loved it immediately. Like, it didn't matter to me that I was answering 800 number calls. I loved that job immediately because it put me in an environment where I got to meet other people who had the same kinds of goals. And your environment makes such a big difference when you're just starting out. So over the years, I wanted to work for all those big companies that we all want to work for: Microsoft, Apple, IBM. I wanted to be in tech, and I couldn't get them to hire me because I didn't check the right boxes for them. Now, of course, at University of Maryland, you're checking those boxes, so that makes it a little bit easier. But you're going to encounter obstacles. I encountered obstacles. Yours might be different. And I just never gave up. And a while later, I happened to be in a meeting with a potential client for the company I was working for at the time. And it turned out to be Loyola University in Maryland. And, I won't share the whole story with you now about that. We can do that at another time. In fact, Edwin and I are going to do some fun things back and forth where we share some of this content online in another post. So if you really want to learn more about it, follow us and we'll make sure you get access to it. But the bottom line is I ended up getting an MBA without finishing high school or college. And it was at Loyola University. So they accepted me into their program. And after that happened, I thought, great, I'm going to go back to all those companies I want to work for, and they're going to hire me now. Because now I'm going to have an MBA. And so I thought I'd be a more desirable candidate. The truth is that it didn't work out that way, because it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And I had to accept that perhaps there needed to be a different path for me. And so I started going to smaller companies and applying. And I knew that in smaller companies, I could make a bigger impact. And I knew what I was capable of. And I just wanted a chance to prove myself. So that's how I ended up in the entrepreneurial community. And it very quickly turned into a great fit for me. Now, one of the challenges in smaller companies is that you might have slightly less experienced management. And that can be frustrating at times. But the truth is, there's also a great opportunity. If you're willing to work hard and prove yourself, smaller companies can be a great way to go. And if you have that entrepreneurial spirit in you, which I clearly had, it was a perfect fit. So I ended up going to a company in DC. I did very well there, successfully closed some big deals for them, and then realized that equity is what I wanted. I wanted to have ownership. I truly wanted to be an entrepreneur and build a company from the ground up and have the potential upside that comes with that. And I went into a company that was very much in need of fundraising. In fact, they were on the verge of insolvency, and I turned it around and made it very successful. It was a tech company, venture backed. And that kind of cemented my place in the entrepreneurial community. And that at that point, I was like, I really enjoyed working with entrepreneurs, and I understood the value and the attraction of that particular path. And that became the focus for the rest of my career. And honestly, it's the reason I do this today. Because when I was in that role trying to understand what to do, people met with me and they helped me. And I want to do the same for you, which is why I'm here today. So I ended up also being in public office and having the honor of serving my community, which was wonderful. But the best title that I consider for myself, other than mom, is entrepreneur. So whenever anyone asks me what my title is, I say entrepreneur, because I just think it's the greatest calling. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Edwin and say, we're open to any questions you have, and we want to talk about this journey and what it looks like and provide some context where helpful. So let's go, Edwin. What's your first question?
Sure. So my first question is, what's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make early on?
That's a tough one. Boy, probably spending too much money too soon. Well, actually, spending money is a really critical part of the early days in entrepreneurship because, of course, there are such limited funds available. But But probably the biggest challenge that early stage companies, I should say early stage entrepreneurs make, is they don't clearly understand the roles of each of the founders. I think from day one, you have to be very clear about who owns what and what that looks like. And so, if, for example, you've come up with a great idea and you're pretty excited to get this company funded, but you have a couple other people you're working with, you need to be clear about who owns what, who contributed what, and if there are patents involved, the order on those patents. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I worked with a company very early on. Actually, I'll share one of the companies I worked with, and then I'll give you an example that wasn't my company. When I first joined the company, I shared with you where I went in, and it was pretty early and they were sort of struggling and it was a turnaround. There were a lot of people involved in that company. We'd have meetings and there'd be people all around the conference room table talking about the future of this company. And they were all excited about the future, but what they didn't understand is what each person had to contribute. And ultimately, you wanted to understand when you put together a cap table, which is really a spreadsheet of ownership and who owns what percentage, each of those people felt like they were going to be on that cap table. And you have to be clear about their contribution because you're giving up a percentage of your company to each of those folks. And so, to be honest, it was kind of tough, but I had to let some of those folks go because they weren't directly contributing to the value of the company. And it was even more complicated than that because there were 3 founders and 2 founders had really come up with the idea and patented the idea. But the 3rd founder happened to be in the room during a critical conversation about the patent. And he made simply a statement about how the patent might be considered. Now, if you took the depth of the first 2 founders, that was 99% of the value in the patent. But this 3rd founder happened to be in the room at the right place at the right time. Well, when that patent was filed, all 3 names were on it. And when that company was incorporated, they were all 3 listed as co-founders. And they equally 1/3 each split the equity on the cap table. And then when the company was sold, they each got an equal payout. That's a big number potentially if you have a successful company. So you have to be very mindful of who's in the room and who's contributing what. So that story, I think, is very illustrative of the importance of documenting what each founder owns and what each founder contributes. And you have to do that from the earliest days. Now, you don't need a lawyer for that right away. You can just do it in an email, as long as everybody's on the same page and everyone's agreed. A second example I'll give you is not a company I was involved with, but that I knew about pretty closely. There was someone in Baltimore who started a company. It was years ago, and they got some of the top venture capital investors in the country to invest in it. Very hot deal. Everybody wanted to be in this deal. It was very exciting. And the funding amount was $55 million when they were about to launch. All of the documents were done. Now, the documents in an institutional round of investing from a venture capitalist are very complex. It's an expensive endeavor to take that money in, and it's a pretty thorough process between vetting the company, the idea, the team, and going through the entire due diligence process. It leads to a pretty hefty set of documents by the end of that process. They had spent all the money on lawyers, which is a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars, finalizing this deal. And in fact, they had some of the top venture capital investors in the country who were leading this deal. Right before the funding was supposed to hit their bank, before the wire hit their bank, someone came out of the background and said, "I'm a co-founder." Now, this person had emails to document their early involvement with the company, but they weren't on the cap table. So the founders went back to this person and tried to negotiate a deal, and they couldn't come to agreement. That company was not funded. And in fact, overnight, it evaporated. So all that money had been spent. And in fact, they were ready to launch. And ultimately, the company shut down. So it's very important to understand who plays what role, and an understanding as well of who is going to own what as a result of their contribution. Now, I know that's not something you want to talk about with your co-founders when you're sitting around the table, but it is a fact that you've got to be really clear about it if you have something great and you think it's going to get funded. So that's probably my number one as far as mistakes or challenges. The second thing, which I learned not only through my own experience, but also when I was out at Stanford, I was there for the executive program, and they reinforced this. You need a great lawyer and you need a great accountant. You need to have solid record keeping from day one and a clear understanding of how to protect yourself from day one. So find a law firm that's strong and reputable, but also willing to work with an early stage company. There are a lot of law firms that will give you a lot of upfront support before they start billing. And you can have that conversation with them and see what they're willing to do to work with you. In fact, some will even take equity. And you want to start with probably QuickBooks, but have a solid accountant in the background to make sure that you're doing everything by the book. So they would be my primary recommendations.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah. And my second question for you is, what's one habit that successful entrepreneurs should develop?
One habit let me think about that. So first of all, Edwin, let me tell you, I'm so happy that you're asking these questions because you're the creator, like you're the entrepreneur who's out there, creating value and opportunity. And so you're sitting in the seat that so many people who are joining us are in. So it makes it so relatable because we get to see the questions from your perspective, which is really great. So thank you for doing this today. Probably the best habit I would say is that obviously if you're an entrepreneur, if you're driven to build a company and be successful, you have the constitution for it. You're probably active, you're probably energized, you're exercising, you're getting it done every day, you're working hard, you're putting in the time, you're probably pretty committed to your path. I think what's often forgotten though is to take time to think. And I will admit, I learned this lesson the hard way. I once had a founder in a company who sent me a note saying, this company is basically exhausting me. I've lost my creativity because I'm in the office all the time in meetings and I can no longer think about what I've created. And it was kind of hard to get that message from someone that I was really counting on to help me raise money. But the truth is, he was right. You need time to think, especially as an entrepreneur. I think there's like this idea or this mindset that you're working 24/7. And if you're not against the wall every day, that you can't successfully build a company. But the truth is that you have to have time to step back, clear your mind, and start again. So for example, in the midst of building companies, when I was absolutely overwhelmed and nervous and scared about raising money, about building the right team, about putting the right pieces in place to build a successful company, I used to go home and not take my laptop. I know that sounds, we were in the office all the time then. I know it was more Zoom centric now, but it's the same concept. This is my home office, right? Sometimes you have to walk away from it and you have to give yourself the freedom to think. And so I think there's a tendency, especially in our 24/7 business world these days, particularly with the availability of Zoom, to not step away. And in fact, that is so essential because you need clarity. And creativity and clarity both come from having a little bit of space and a little bit of time. So carve that time out for yourself. For some people, it's before they go to bed every night. Or maybe it's at the end of the day, you take some time, you turn everything off, and then you come back and check your email before you go to sleep. Whatever works for you is great, but you need time regularly to really clear the slate and have some clarity and some creativity thinking. So I'm going to strongly suggest that. I don't think it is natural to do that as an entrepreneur, but I do think it's essential. You need that space. It's also good for mental health. Some people ask me, they're like, how do you handle a really bad day? Well, sometimes you have to go to sleep and start again tomorrow. I know it sounds very simple, but it's true. Not every day is going to be a home run. And so when it's not, make sure that you give yourself the freedom to step away, take a break, and then start again tomorrow. So I think it's important to take care of yourself and find that balance.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. If anyone else wants to, ask Laura a question, feel free to do that. But my next question would be, what's the most important skill an entrepreneur should master?
What's the most important skill
An entrepreneur should master, yes.
That an entrepreneur masters?
Yes.
I don't know if you could call it a skill. I would say it's an undeniable belief in yourself. So, and that should not be confused with self-esteem. So look, we've all had challenges in life. If you're an entrepreneur and you've had challenges in life, you're better prepared to succeed than if you haven't. I know that's a controversial statement, but I do believe that challenges prepare you for opportunity. And at the end of the day, you have to believe in yourself and bet on yourself in order to be successful. So I had a lot of early challenges. I mean, my life was very difficult. In fact, it was so difficult that there were times, honestly, I didn't even know if I was going to make it. And there was a period of time where it just felt overwhelming. I couldn't get a break. Between the ages of 18 and 30, I moved 19 times. There were times I had to choose between food, gas, and rent. I know what it's like to live in that place where you don't have certainty, you don't have a foundation, and you don't have a place to turn. That truthfully prepared me to be an entrepreneur. I think the reason I was so successful with it is because I learned how to solve problems. I learned how to be resilient. I learned how to show up. I learned how to raise my hand and say, hey, I want to try this, because the alternative for me was worse. It was dire. And so because I went through those challenges and hardships, it better prepared me to be successful and to think creatively and innovatively. So when you've got to figure out how to like pay for enough gas to get to work and enough food to get by for a couple of days, you learn how to be resourceful and think differently. And so that thinking differently is what ultimately prepared me to think differently about opportunities that other people passed on. So most of my big successes have been turnarounds. They've been companies that maybe other people passed on, actually sometimes for years, because I thought differently about them. I trusted myself to make the right decision. I knew that I could find the value because I'd had to do it for myself, and now I was doing it for companies. So I want you to embrace those challenges. I want you to embrace the fact that you're going to get knocked down, you're going to fail. In fact, we could spend some time on this call talking about the things that I tried to do that were not successful, that were failures. You can't be successful without building failures into the journey. It makes you resilient, it makes you more determined, and it teaches you some important lessons about what to do next time. So I don't regret that any of that happened, but the truth is when you're in it, it's really hard to see that. But I promise you that that experience ultimately will help you be successful. So at the end of the day, it's about an undeniable belief in yourself. That doesn't mean you're always right. That doesn't mean you feel good every minute of every day. What it means is that you know that you can count on yourself to get it done. And that's what I developed through all those challenges, was an undeniable belief in myself. When someone else didn't believe in me, I believed in myself. And you must have that in order to be a successful entrepreneur.
So how would someone like develop that skill to really believe in themselves? Like, would you say, would it be overcoming difficult challenges? Or
If you're fortunate to grow up in a family where, you know, your parents see that in you, that's wonderful. Like, I hope my children know that I think they're amazing. My son talks about being an entrepreneur, and I know that he believes that he can do it. He believes in himself, but that's because he's been raised to believe in himself. If you're one of those people who didn't have that kind of family, what I'm saying to you is that you need to have that for yourself. You need to create that for yourself. And so all those challenges you've encountered that seem almost impossible and that sometimes you think are going to take you down are really preparing you for an opportunity. And so I'll just take a minute and step back. When I went into this company that I talked about, the company was Matrix. It was a couple of guys out of NSA who started this company, and they had been around for over 3 years trying to launch this company. Everyone passed on it. They took it to all the right people. They took it to every potential investor, and they all passed on it. And then I was introduced to them. And it's kind of hard to step into an opportunity where you know that you're like going to climb a mountain. But they didn't have any financing. They had a lot of debt. They'd made a lot of the early stage mistakes that investors don't love. For example, they took the IP out of the company and licensed it back. They bought a condo for their office building and rented it back to the company. They leased really high-end cars and furniture and computers. Now, all of that sounds great if you can do it. If you're starting out with a lot of money and you're flush with cash, that sounds great. That's not how most companies start. And so by the time I walked in, all of these, decisions had been made that were not really helpful in getting the company funded and launching it. A lot of people passed on it. In fact, everyone passed on it. There were people around the table who were interested in the opportunity, but they didn't really know how to launch the company, how to get it funded, how to put the team together to make it successful. The reason I was able to do that when other people were not is because I know how to solve problems. Like, I could look at it and see where the value was. And so even though it wasn't technology that I was personally connected to or had any experience with, the truth is that this really challenging background that I had taught me to trust myself to make the right decision. And so I'm saying that to you. That's happening for everyone on this call right now. You've seen challenges in your life that have, been varying degrees of difficult. Some of them you thought might actually take you down. But the truth is, those experiences are helping you better believe in what you're capable of in the future. If you can get through them and if you can overcome them, you will learn from them. And those lessons are what will prepare you for building a successful company, because nothing requires more resilience than being an entrepreneur. If you want to build a company, especially if you want to get institutional financing to build that company, you need to be determined and resilient. And so I would challenge you to think of all those things that have happened on your journey as preparing you to be determined and be resilient in the face of what will obviously and most definitely be some rejection along the way as you work toward being successful as an entrepreneur. Think of it as part of the journey instead of a setback, because we all have failures. And in fact, I'll share one with you that I had. So I shared with you this great success. Everyone knows that company was successful. That's wonderful. Well, the company right before that was a company I launched with someone I worked with. We were co-founders. I didn't actually plan to run the company. I thought my business partner would. And it turned out he wasn't comfortable in that role either. But I raised $100 million in financing for this company. It was called RadiusNet. And we got a term sheet from an investor, or I want to say it was 50 million. And we got another, actually it was 25 million. And then we got 75 million in vendor financing. The total deal package was around $100 million. And that sounds great. Like, that's awesome. I'm in my early 30s, like I'm building a $100 million company and I've got investors interested. I've got Cisco as a potential partner. It looked great. The truth is, I wasn't the right person to run that company because I was too young and inexperienced. So I needed someone who brought not only more experience in that particular area, but also could help us raise the next round of money. And so we found the perfect guy. We went on a CEO search. We hired a search firm and we found the perfect potential CEO. And the truth is, he really was the perfect candidate. And we put an attractive package in front of him. And we said, look, I was happy to give up part of what I had in order to get the right person, because the goal was for the overall company to be successful, not just me. And so there's some give and take with that. And I was willing to give up whatever it took to get the right guy in, or gal, to run the company. In this case, it was a guy. Now, we thought we were ready. We were ready. We had a year into this. I had cashed in a lot of my savings to do this deal. It was very exciting. And they were pretty heady times because we already had an investor lined up. We took the deal to the guy and he said, yeah, I'd like to be the CEO. Great. That's awesome. This was a great game-changing opportunity for him too, because he had always been the number two. Now he'd get to be the number one. Well, he took that deal and he went back to his employer to let them know that he was thinking of leaving. And they put a more attractive deal on the table for him. In fact, they put millions of dollars of stock options in front of him that he couldn't turn down because that company was already funded. He was already in a stable, well-funded company who was a leader in the space, and he would have had to leave that to come to our startup. And while he would have had a significant role and equity position, it was a bigger risk, and he had a family. So he ended up turning us down in the end. We thought we had a yes, and then it ended up being a no. Well, we couldn't move forward without that person, that key person on our team. So I found someone else to replace him, which we thought would be a great fit. And it ended up that that wasn't the right fit. In fact, that person ultimately wanted to acquire our business plan and start his own venture. But in the meantime, we realized that the time was slipping by. We had a year into this, a year of no income, like no salary, no money coming in at all, no consulting revenue, no health benefits. Like it was really hard to go that extended period of time. And on top of that, I was investing money. So I was spending money on this operation. After a year of working on it, we realized that without this key person on our team, we weren't going to be able to move forward. And we ended up shutting it down. Now, you can say that was painful for sure. I mean, the time, the money, the energy that was expended on that deal, it was really hard to let it go. But the truth is, I wouldn't have been prepared for the next one had I not gone through that experience. I didn't know how to raise venture capital. When the failed company, I learned how to raise venture capital. I went to a seminar called How to Raise Venture Capital at Loyola University. I had never raised money before. So I went to this seminar on how to raise venture capital, and I started that process in the company that didn't get off the ground. And so that experience actually prepared me for the next venture, which was Matrix, which ended up being hugely successful. So failure is a part of success, and I think you have to embrace that. The truth is, we always look at the successes and say, I want that. But if you're not willing to take the risk of the failure, you're not going to likely get to the success. It's quite rare. I mean, obviously there are exceptions, but usually it's part of the journey that you have to have that learning experience.
Thank you so much for your answer. So Anthony has a question for you. He asked, I plan to approach and message businesses / influencers to get early sales and awareness for my startup, and I don't want to come across as a sleazy salesman. Do you have advice for cold approaching busy people for business matters?
Do you mean, what is my advice on getting an early customer?
Uh, I I think he's concerned that he's inexperienced with his startup and he wants to approach different influencers and businesses, and he wants advice on how to approach them.
Well, I would say if you're comfortable jumping in and being on the call, then I'll be happy to go back and forth with you, and answer your question. But based on the question itself, I will tell you, at the end of the day, sales is where it's at. I mean, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't sell it to other folks, you're never going to get it off the ground. And if we're being honest, no one ever talks about that. We're always talking about the great ideas. But if you have a great idea that you don't actually convince other people to spend money on, it's not going to be a great company. So there's this tendency to like really put the technology founder on a pedestal or the scientist on a pedestal. But the truth is, we need to put the business people on a pedestal too, because picking up the phone and calling someone and trying to convince them to get excited about your product is really hard to do. And I would suggest a couple things. One, have a great product. I'm just assuming that you do. And so I'm going to just trust that. And assuming that you do, you should not be worried. You should be confident asking other people to get behind it. So they want new ideas. They want good opportunities. And if you have something to offer, they'll be interested in that. What they're not interested in is being sold relentlessly on something that they're not connected with. So when I have a lead, and I will tell you, I'm kind of relentless on a deal. If I want to close a deal, like I'm gonna close that deal. So I'll give you a great example. A long time ago, it was a while ago, but the same rules still apply. I wanted to close this big deal. I was working for an internet company, and the company wanted to do an IPO. And when I joined the company, it was just an idea. It was a patent. It wasn't even a product yet. And so I wanted to we knew that hotels were the ideal target market for us. And I wanted to get a big hotel chain to sign off on this deal. So what I did was I signed up for a conference for that particular industry, went to that conference, and ended up meeting folks who were sort of making early decisions on technology and hospitality. It was a hotel chain that I was targeting. So it was, first I got Microsoft to endorse our technology. I'm not sure that's going to happen for every deal, but in that case, I was successful doing that. But more importantly, I identified my target client, and I learned everything I could about them. The person who was going to make the decision, I wanted to know what was important to him, what his priorities were. My job was to make him look good in his organization. The way I make him look good in his organization is by giving him something that's valuable. I'm giving him an opportunity to say, hey, if you buy this product, not only is it going to be great for your organization, but it's going to make you look good within your organization because you've made a good decision about this particular investment in a product. In that case, it ended up being a partnership. So make sure that you align what you're offering with what they need or what is going to be helpful to them. And look, we're all busy. We're all in a hurry. You need to make sure it aligns with your target's interests, needs, their career, and their company's mission, right? So you have to align all of those things. It's not just enough to say, hey, I have this great product and I want to sell it. You have to understand how that product is going to be helpful to that particular person. Now, in the case of an influencer, it's a little bit different than a company. Again, it must align with what they stand for. And if it does, then they're going to be more receptive to meeting with you or considering what you have to offer. Just be clear about what you're offering them and what you're asking of them. So that's how I approach sales. Now, like all of you, I get relentless texts and emails and messages, especially on LinkedIn, from people saying, we want to sell our services. I'm going to be honest with you, I just unconnect them. If you sent me 2 emails out of the blue and I don't know you, I'm just going to disconnect you on LinkedIn, or I'm going to block you if you've sent me an email or a text. That is a misalignment. And candidly, it is taking my time for granted. And so a prospect isn't interested in that. They want to know that you're aligned in what you have to offer their company and them. So make sure that you understand what that is and think of it from an ROI perspective. What is the return on investment for them? If they do this for you, what will be the return for them? How is that helpful to them as an individual and within the context of their company? That's how I approach sales. If you approach sales like that, it's really hard to not be successful because you're valuing and respecting the prospect's time, their interests, their motivation, and their goals. And that's what I would encourage you to think about as you're trying to make those connections for those kinds of opportunities.
That was a great answer and question. Thank you.
Thank you. What else do you have, Edwin?
Sure. I mean, if anyone else wants to ask questions, I will definitely read them. But my question for you is, how important is passion versus practicality in entrepreneurship? Yeah.
You had to bring up the passion word. I don't use that word very often, and I'll tell you why. Because there's so many things you have to do on the path to success that you're not going to want to do. So if you're passionate about being an entrepreneur, then I would encourage you to break that down and figure out what that means. Does that mean you're a self-starter and you want to create your own value? Does that mean you want autonomy? Does that mean that you believe that you can build something successful? Does that mean that you believe that you've created something that no one else has? That's really the core of it for me than it is a passion to be an entrepreneur. Now, the truth is I had my very first lemonade stand when I was 7. And when I was 11, I was buying bags of candy and selling them individually for the markup. Like, obviously I had that entrepreneurial spirit in me and I just didn't realize what it was. But becoming an entrepreneur was not about passion. It was about practicality, which is you've got to do a lot of jobs you don't enjoy along the way. When I was CEO of a company that had venture financing already, by the way, I was sweeping the kitchen floor. I was stocking the refrigerator with drinks for my team. I was going to Sam's Club because we were a team and we all worked together. And so I was willing to do whatever it takes. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to have that mindset of I'll do whatever it takes to make it successful. Now, I encourage a timeline and a limit to how much you're willing to invest, and knowing what your limits are in those 2 areas will help you put some guardrails around it. But at the end of the day, it's really about, are you willing to do whatever you have to do to make it successful? And that's not just in that role. That's in other things that you do. When I waited tables, I wanted to be the best possible waitress. Whatever I do, I want to put everything into, and I view every job as meaningful. In fact, waiting tables made me a better entrepreneur. I learned how to interact with people, how to give them what they need, how to make a presentation, how to stand on my own 2 feet and say something confidently, when in fact, before that, I don't know if I could have done it. So every single job that you have or experience you have prepares you to be successful. And I think that we often hear these narratives. My son told me, he's a sophomore in college, and he told me like some crazy number of high school seniors think that they're going to be billionaires by 25. Well, the truth is, that's A, probably not going to happen, but B, there are a lot of jobs early in your career that are helping prepare you to be successful. You can certainly be a millionaire, but you're going to have to do some sweeping of the floors and waiting on people and jobs that you don't enjoy. And the truth is, those jobs you don't enjoy are really going to prepare you for being successful when you're in the role where you have to convince other people to sign on to your opportunity. And so view it as part of the journey again. And so much of it is about practicality and not about passion. The passion is believing in yourself. I want you to believe in yourself and what you have to offer. I want you to know that the mere fact that you're on this call, sitting here with us today, means that you believe that you have something to offer. You chose to show up for this because you believe in yourself. That's what passion is about. It's showing up and believing in yourself. The different parts along the way that prepare you for success, though, are the practicality piece. That part is absolutely essential, and it often gets overlooked. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Edwin, because it is an important part of the process.
Thank you. That was really insightful. Guess no one else wants to ask any questions, so I'll just continue asking.
You have good questions, Edwin, so
Okay.
hopefully they're helpful for
Uh,
everyone. I think they're great.
I guess we could talk about like what kind of common are to pitfalls are there for entrepreneurs and how you could kind of navigate through them.
So if you're in a position where you've gotten some money, let's just say friends and family or early investment money, probably the number one pitfall is spending too much money too soon. And I say this as someone who, an investor once said to me, you're not thinking big enough. What would you do if you had $100 million? And I said, I don't have $100 million. I have $1 million. And actually, ultimately, 2 million from that particular investor. It's very important to view the money that's invested in your company the same way as if it was your own money. So that is a big pitfall that a lot of people fall into, is they get a little bit of money and they think that they're going to make some, they do make some decisions. They think that they're going to like get that next tranche of money is going to come just as easily. And the truth is, it doesn't usually. So you want to be always raising money and understand that there's a timeline attached to raising money. And the money that you do get, regardless of who it comes from, even if it's from you, make sure that you're spending it very carefully. So anytime you think you're going to need money for a venture, you want to be raising at least 6 months out, minimum 6 months out. It takes that long to generate interest. And you also need to treat raising money the same as a sales pipeline. So, if you're looking at potential targets to sell to, you understand the concept of a pipeline. Like, these are your prospects and this is the process for, going after those prospects. Raising money is exactly the same. Treat it like a sales pipeline. So what I say to folks who are early on is forget about, complicated software. Just start an Excel spreadsheet. Hot leads, warm leads, cold leads, and put them all in there and keep follow-up notes so that you know where they are, and review it constantly, at least every week, because you're never going to raise money just by talking to this person or that person randomly. You need a system and a process for tracking those opportunities, just like you would with sales leads. And I don't know many startup companies who do this, truthfully. Most of them think that the customers will come because they've come up with something really great. You have to build a sales pipeline and you have to build an investor pipeline. And so that requires relentless follow-up and an objective perspective on that list of leads and whether or not they are likely to close. So keep building the pipeline. People might drop off or drop down Usually they drop down to cold if they're not going to invest, but they shouldn't really go away, and you should keep populating it with new opportunities and new leads. So this morning I was at a venture conference here in Baltimore, which is where I am right now. And I took an entrepreneur with me to that event, and I introduced him to people. So he met at least a half a dozen people at that event who are potential leads for investing in his company. All of those leads need to go into the spreadsheet, and you need to track those leads for follow-up and treat it like it's a sales process. And I don't know a lot of founders who do that, truthfully. And I do think that's one of the biggest pitfalls. You're never going to get funded if you don't treat it that way, because the truth is that people are busy and you're trying to get some of their attention. So you want to make the most of that time when you actually have them. And then the other thing is you need a really solid slide deck. 6, 10, 12 slides. That's another presentation. We can do it another time, although I've posted about it on LinkedIn and also talked about it through University of Maryland. There's a formula for that slide deck, and you have to go through that exercise of taking your idea and your company and putting it into a slide deck, because there are certain questions that the audience is going to want to have answered. And that slide deck forces you to go through the exercise of thinking through your idea and your company and what that would look like. So you must do that in order to get funded or to launch, because it's not just about the slides. It's not about delivering a PowerPoint presentation. It's about thinking through what you need to consider to get the company launched. And that's what those slides force you to do, is to think through what's the problem you're solving, what's the market you're going after, what are the assumptions that should be considered in building a financial spreadsheet to do projections or calculations. The most important thing of your financial projections is really whether or not you understand what it takes to build this business. It's not what the actual numbers look like, because everybody's numbers look like this, right? They're all straight up. We're going to make a lot of money in the next 5 years. That's not often how it works, but investors aren't even as interested in that or those numbers as they are interested in what are the assumptions that go into building the financial model for your business. Do you understand all the costs that have to go into it? Do you understand the buying cycle for your prospective customers? Do you understand the potential challenges you could run into? And the number one saying that everyone has about early stage companies is founders don't know what they don't know. So anything that you can do to prove that you've thought through these things is going to give you instant credibility. And I think it's going to help you be more successful.
Thank you. Let's see. Last couple questions. I think we only have 10 more minutes. Or
The time goes by so fast.
yeah, it does. Let's see. That's a good one.
You're doing great, Edwin. Thanks for doing this today. It's really fun to do this with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. So my question is, how do you handle failure as entrepreneur?
Oh,
More general one, but
crushing. It does happen. I mean, it is part of the process. You know, in the moment, it feels like you're a failure. That's what I say all the time. Everyone talks about the importance of failure and succeeding, but in the moment, it feels like a failure. And I don't think there's any way to get around that. I mean, it is part of the process. There just are very few people who go directly to success. And unfortunately, they're the ones we hear about all the time. But if you really talk to a group of entrepreneurs, if you got a group of successful entrepreneurs into a room, any random 20, I promise you almost every one of them would share with you the failures that happened on their path to success. But in the moment, there's not much you can do other than accept that it just didn't go the way you wanted it to. I'm a believer in those moments and checking out, like take a couple days off, go to the beach, go to a happy place, just shut down the computer and take a break, a mental break. Because you can't start something new when you're still living in that moment of frustration and disappointment. So you need a transition. But in the moment when it actually happens, I mean, just understand that it might be preparation for what's next. It might be the lesson you needed to learn. In my case, I needed to learn how to raise money, and I learned how to raise money in a company that was a failure. And if I hadn't had those lessons, I don't know if I would have been ready for the next opportunity, which was a huge success. So view it, take the lessons out of it, sit down at your computer and pull that out if that's helpful for you. Pull out what the lessons were, or even if you don't do that, understand that there's a reason for that experience. Now, I don't know that there's necessarily a reason for everything. We could have a whole nother philosophical conversation on that, but that actually doesn't really matter. What matters is that you take the lessons out of the experience and you accept that you took the risk. Be proud of yourself for taking a chance. Be proud of yourself for showing up, because so many people don't. And I'll give you a great example. I was out at Stanford Business School for the summer for the executive program. And while I was out there, greatest experience, it was really fun. There were people from all over the world. It was CEO and country level people from all over the world who were invited to this program. I was honored to be there. I was one of the youngest people to be there. And by the way, one of the only females. While I was there, I was closing a financing round, a venture capital financing round. And I closed a Series A while I was out there. And one of my colleagues who was in the program was the CEO of Shandong at the time. And we went out to Shandong in Napa Valley. I think it was in Napa Valley, and had a nice lunch, and all these, very successful people were there running these big companies. And here I am, this lowly tech entrepreneur. But I got my company financed and I closed a Series A round. So it was a big deal. So I went to my friend and I said, I'm going to buy a case of champagne. Technically, I think it's called sparkling wine, but I'm going to buy a case of champagne and we're going to celebrate closing this financing round while I'm here with all of you, because it was 144 of us. And I was just so grateful to be there, and such an incredible group of folks. And I made many friends. And I said, I want to celebrate this big milestone with all of you. And so I bought the champagne and we had a big toast, and I can't even count, like literally can't even count the number of people who came up to me afterwards and said, I want to be an entrepreneur too. I want to do this too. And I didn't realize it at the time, although what I didn't realize is that I didn't have the right words for it. The truth is that not too many of them were going to become entrepreneurs. In fact, I'm not sure any of them did. And the reason is that the entrepreneurial mindset is very different than the big company mindset. If you spent your career coming up through a big company with resources and structure and management, you've had a very different career than if you go out and create something and have to rely on yourself to create value. And so the truth is, I wanted to be them. Like, I wanted that kind of opportunity. I wanted to go to Apple. I wanted to go to Hewlett Packard. But that wasn't my journey. Instead, I created my own path. And ultimately, I realized that being an entrepreneur was the right path for me. Just know that they're very different. There are some people who come out of big companies and are entrepreneurs and are successful, but that's not the norm, because the mindset is different. The entrepreneurial journey is about scarce resources and betting on yourself and believing in yourself. And the big company path is about understanding structure and understanding that there are expectations and that they already have a system in place. And yes, there can be innovation in big companies, but the innovation that's required to be a successful entrepreneur is very different. So I learned to embrace my journey and accept that that's where I was. And I love all of those people. And I am so happy that they have the opportunities that they've had, but it's very different. I don't think there's a lot of crossover. If you feel like you're on this journey to be an entrepreneur, then you are, because you've already decided. It's something that you know, and it's about showing up. It's about believing in yourself, and it's about investing in yourself. And so if you're doing that, you have my highest praise, because I do think it is not an easy thing to do, but it is also something that I felt like I absolutely had to do.
Thank you so much for that. I guess a follow-up question to that is, how do you know if you should just stick to your plan or pivot?
Well, should you stick with it or give up? Is that what you're saying?
Or change directions?
Well, sometimes you do change directions. I mean, there's if you've ever heard of Honest Tea, the gentleman who started that company, he's based in Maryland, very successful, sold it, started another company, realized very far down the path that his new company was not headed in the right direction. He redirected, and now he's built another successful company. So you do have to change direction sometimes. I would encourage you to look them up because it's a great Maryland success story. Sometimes you have to change and you have to be willing to accept that. We did. So at Matrix, the company that we started, we had intellectual property and we had two founders who had come up with a great idea. But the truth is, some of the people we hired, one person in particular asked the question differently, and that became a whole new patent. And in fact, that became the product in the company. Change happens constantly in entrepreneurial companies. I think the bigger challenge is knowing when you should or shouldn't give up. And there is no right or wrong answer for that. For me, there was no option. Like I couldn't accept that I wouldn't succeed. And I had too much riding on it, too much at stake. I had cashed in all my savings. I cashed in my retirement account. I was paying money on credit cards or paying bills on credit cards, and I was borrowing money. So I had a lot at stake and I just couldn't accept that I wouldn't be successful. Like it just wasn't something I could even consider. Now it's very difficult and stressful. There were moments that were particularly tough, but like I just believed that if I believed in myself, I would make it happen. But I always advise entrepreneurs to set some guardrails, put a timeline on it, put maybe a highest possible number you'll go to when investing in it. You've got to have a ceiling and you have to have a limit to what you're willing to do because not every idea is going to get funded. The company I shared with you that was a failure, it was still a good idea. We just didn't get it off the ground. It might not be about your idea. It might be about timing or other factors that you can't control. And so just be open to that because if you're an entrepreneur today, you'll be an entrepreneur again tomorrow. That doesn't go away because the idea changes.
Thank you so much. We have a minute left, but could I ask you a question that Anthony asked? He asked, what are your thoughts on offering your product for free early on?
What are my thoughts on
offering your products for free early on?
Your products? Offering your products early
on? Yes, for free.
For free? Oh, for free.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in that. I mean, look, obviously it's dependent on the situation, but yeah, I mean, you need people to agree to use your product. And, look, I was in a meeting yesterday with someone who has a great idea, has invested $500,000 into their idea, and is trying to get it out into the market and raise financing. He said what so many people say, which is that I'm trying to find someone to license this product. That is not the typical, that's not the norm. That's not typically going to happen. No one's going to license your product until you've proven that it works. You have to prove the efficacy of your idea. And so you have to get your product out into the market with some early adopters. I personally believe it's absolutely essential. Now, others might disagree with me on this, and I do know a lot of people like the licensing model, and there are exceptions when that's been successful. But generally, you have to prove that you can turn it into a product, at least a prototype of a product, and that people would be willing to pay money for it. One of the ways they can demonstrate that they're willing to pay money for it is to use it without paying money for it and become someone who is willing to give you a recommendation. So for example, if you have a prospective customer who you want to give the product to get them to use it, in exchange for that, they can be willing to talk to potential investors or other prospective customers about your idea. There are other ways to get paid besides just an exchange of cash for your product. So I would ask for that, recommendations, being a resource, an early adopter, and helping to promote it with other prospective customers. There are other ways to put that conversation together. You are getting something then for the product. You're not really actually giving it away for free. What you're doing is you're not getting paid for it, but you are getting something that's equally as valuable. So there are other ways to put those deals together. And I do believe that they're a good idea. I absolutely believe you have to find people who are willing to get behind your product and say that it's a good product in order to get other people to pay for it.
Thank you so much. I think we finished right on time.
You did a great job, Edwin.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for being here.
Awesome. Well, and
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who joined us as well today. It's really lovely to be with you. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you. And I really appreciate having a partner today with me.
Thank you so much, both Laura, and thank you so much, Edwin. Fantastic questions. And Laura, you handled them all well, as we all knew you would. So there was another question to you that I will send to you privately. And the person who asked me, okay, I see your email address. All right. So I'll forward it to you privately. And I thank you so much to both of you. This has been fantastic. I will post this on Startup UMD YouTube channel. Please share it on your LinkedIn if you liked this session, if you want others to learn from it.
Terrific.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alan.